Hello, everyone. All In Together welcomes you to the Census 2020 Be Counted for the Greater Good workshop. My name is Elisabeth Samson Lee. I'm the Midwest Fellow at All In Together. A little about me and how I got involved. After a workplace sexual assault in 2012 and its aftermath, I began fighting for laws, policies, and accountability to ensure safe workplaces for all, particularly in the field of law enforcement. At that time, I found All In Together and spent 2 years in the Emerging Leaders Program because I'm committed to raising awareness and action around the importance of women's civic leadership and the experiences and needs of sexual assault survivors. I truly believe in the power of every individual to create political impact and continue to say yes to the opportunities that present themselves. And hopefully by the end of this workshop, you'll find some things you would like to say yes to. I encourage you to join the conversation and follow All In Together on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. What you will learn today, we'll talk about the 2020 census and why it's vital to be counted, who represents you and why it matters, why it's so important to use your voice with your vote and ensure other voices count, and what's next, creating an action plan. The mission of All In Together is to equip voting age American women with action-oriented, nonpartisan civic education to realize their full potential as leaders shaping our nation. The Community Leadership Program is a national, nonpartisan program that is closing the gender gap in civic leadership by equipping women across America to become civic leaders in their communities and beyond. Redefining civic engagement. What actions come to mind when you think of civic engagement? Civic engagement includes any action that allows us to access political power and influence political decision-making. It goes beyond voting and running for office. It includes contacting elected officials, speaking at a town hall, testifying before a legislative body, writing an op-ed, volunteering for an advocacy organization or campaign that's important to you, donating to an issue or political campaign, registering people to vote, and participating in the census, which is what we'll talk about today. Keep in mind the actions of civic engagement are universal, but where you choose to invest your time and energy is individual to you. 2020 Census Engagement, be counted. Responses to the 2020 census will shape how hundreds of billions of dollars in federal funding are distributed to local communities annually for the next decade. So what is the census? Every 10 years, the United States Census Bureau conducts a nationwide survey to measure the population. The Census Bureau is the federal government's largest statistical agency. It's a nonpartisan institution that produces statistics through data. The census itself is mandated by the United States Constitution and has been administered since 1790, back when George Washington was president. The census asks general questions about age, sex, race, and number of people per household. The census does not ask for personal information like political affiliation, finances, citizenship status, or they will not ask for sensitive and identifying information like Social Security numbers. Why is census participation so important? We'll reiterate that every person counted impacts a decade of funding, public services, and government representation. Census data is used to create and fund government programs, including public infrastructure like schools, libraries, and hospitals, social services like food assistance, housing subsidies, and elderly care services, plus emergency response preparedness like responding to natural disasters. Another thing about the census is it also determines how you'll be represented. The allocation of seats in the House of Representatives and sets the boundaries for congressional, state, and local districts referred to as redistricting. It's also important to note that communities of color and low-income communities have been historically undercounted. That means funding and services don't make it to the communities that need them most. So why are they historically undercounted? Here's what we know from the last time the census was conducted back in 2010. As you can see in this chart here, 74% of households returned their questionnaires, where 26% of households did not. Those who did not return their questionnaires were contacted by the Bureau, faced fines, or were not counted at all. Now remember, this is communities of color and low-income communities who cannot afford fines or cannot afford to not be counted. The 2010 census resulted in some overcounts, which is a result of duplicates, mistakes in recent births or deaths, and census records filed with fake names, birthdays, and other personal data. The net overcount is quite small at 0.01%. 0.8% of the non-Hispanic white population was overcounted, while 0.6% of homeowners were overcounted. More importantly, undercounts occur when people do not respond and or cannot be easily contacted. And you'll see the numbers are a lot higher. 2.1% of the Black population was undercounted, 1.5% of the Hispanic population was undercounted, and 4.9% of the Native Americans living on reservations were undercounted. And this is a problem. One big reason for this are census barriers. There are many barriers to being counted, which include language barriers, mistrust in government, lack of internet connection, concerns about privacy and confidentiality, and low awareness of the census itself. The most at-risk groups for not being counted are children under 5, racial and ethnic minorities, those with limited English proficiency, immigrants, people experiencing homelessness, and people living on reservations. In regard to those barriers of mistrust in government and concerns about privacy and confidentiality, it's important to know who has access to the census data. The Census Act ensures that individuals' responses cannot be used against them. Under the Act, it is illegal for the Census Bureau to disclose identifying data of a respondent, for anyone other than Census Bureau employees to access the data, for data to be used for non-statistical purposes, and for the Bureau to disclose responses to other government agencies. And the barrier of not knowing how to be counted because of special circumstances, it gets in the way. That can involve college students, which of course COVID has changed for this year. People living in shelters are counted at the shelter address. Foreign citizens in the United States are counted at the residence where most time is spent if living in the country. People in healthcare facilities are counted at the facility if a person has no permanent home, is in a psychiatric hospital, or is in a nursing facility. And people living on reservations, we saw that was the most undercounted. They can be counted through phone, online, or paper responses. If possible, they can visit a questionnaire assistance center to obtain a paper form. And please know the 2020 census is not without controversy. Door knocking and other field activities could be cut short a month earlier than planned, which will make the deadline September 30th rather than October 31st. This cutting short of the deadline could cause severe undercount of already underrepresented groups like minorities and rural populations. The House Democrats are pushing for the next coronavirus stimulus package to include providing moving deadline back to the next year. Republicans are not supportive of this, however. Another controversy that has taken place is the president previously advocated for inclusion of citizenship question on the census. So he wanted people to indicate whether or not they were citizens of the United States. And this could have drastically altered the results by preventing people from completing the census. It was, however, ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court last year, and multiple lawsuits have been filed. I believe it's 9 to this point. And if unauthorized immigrants are excluded from the count, Texas would be at high risk of losing a seat in the House of Representatives, which is indicative of what we saw in that last video. Participating in the 2020 census will be the population of all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the 5 U.S. territories. They will all be counted. And for curious minds, the 5 territories are Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, American Samoa, and the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands. For the first time in U.S. history, this year, there will be 3 ways to respond to the census, either online, by phone, or by mail. Census information has been translated into 59 languages to try to overcome the language barrier with the census. And census and further information can be accessed online at www.2020census.gov. It should also be noted that if you've received your paper census and have not completed it yet, and you don't know the code that was sent, you can still access the census through your address and do not need that code. So what is the timeline of the 2020 census? Census Day was April 1st of 2020, which is a key reference date, but not a deadline. That is the date to keep in mind when you tell the Census Bureau where you live as of this date, and include everyone who usually lives and sleeps in your home. In April, the Census Bureau mailed paper questionnaires to homes that had not yet responded online or by phone. And starting in July through September 3rd, census takers will work with administrators at, and colleges is crossed out because of COVID, senior centers, prisons, and other facilities that house large groups of people to make sure everyone is counted. This is also the time where census takers will be out in the communities going to the homes where the census has not yet been completed. And according to the Pew Research Center, 4 in 10 people say they won't answer the door to a census taker. If someone still won't respond to the census or can't be reached in person, census takers will ask a proxy, such as a neighbor or landlord, to help complete the survey. Occasionally, the U.S. Census Bureau uses statistical techniques to fill in the gaps, which can lead to the over and under counts discussed previously. So remember, the new deadline is September 30th for the census. So census workers will go to doors through September. And as of this time, unless it changes, in December, the Census Bureau will deliver apportionment counts to the President and Congress as required by law. And in 2021, on March 31st, the Census Bureau will send redistricting counts to the states. This information is used to redraw legislative districts based on population changes, which was also reflected in the video that we saw. So how can you engage to ensure your community is counted? One way is to find a complete count committee to join by exploring the Bureau's nationwide CCC database or start your own. A complete count committee, otherwise known as a CCC, is made up of a broad spectrum of trusted voices, including government and community leaders from advocacy, education, business, healthcare, and elected officials. The Complete Count Committee mobilizes community members and raises awareness for the importance of an accurate count and encourages responses from its citizens. Another thing you can do is safely attend or host a solutions workshop in your workplace or community to address common barriers to responding, such as privacy and confidentiality concerns, the language barriers, and lack of awareness. You can support the census efforts of advocacy organizations by donating to organizations that are working to make underrepresented populations more visible, using social media to retweet, share, and post about campaigns that target undercounting. And you can volunteer with local organizations that are working in your community to spread awareness of the census. So now we're getting to a related yet different topic, which is who represents you and why that matters. So there are 3 levels of representation in those who represent you and the powers they hold. We have federal, state, and local. The federal level includes the executive branch, which is the president, and the legislative branch, which is Congress. You are directly represented in the federal government by the president and Congress. Broken down, that's 100 senators, 2 per state, and 435 United States House of Representative members. The number of House members per state is determined by the state's share of the US population, which is why it's so important to be counted in that population through the census, and each state has a minimum of 1 member. So state representation includes the executive branch and the legislative branch. You are directly represented in state government by the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, and state legislature, which is 1 House of Representative members and 2 senators. State government structures are laid out in state constitutions and are unique to each state. Some executive branch leaders are typically elected, while others are appointed by the governor. 49 of our states have a bicameral legislature with an upper and a lower house. The state of Nebraska is the only state in the country that does not have a bicameral legislature. Instead, the Nebraska legislature has only 1 house called the unicameral that serves the citizens of the state. Representatives from the unicameral are called senators. It's important to note that term lengths and limits vary from state to state. And to recap, most state legislatures have a House and Senate like Congress. And aside from representation, take note of the trickle-down effect of powers and responsibilities. So the powers of the states: they conduct elections, establish social service programs, education, law enforcement and public safety, state highways, regulate business, state taxes, and create local and county governments. So as part of the overlap, like, we have the same things at local levels, but it's the state that oversees and has ultimate power. An example of this is education. So the governor appoints a commissioner, and in the case of COVID, the state came down with the guidelines for school reopening and gave the power to the school board to make the ultimate decision on how to start the school year. So you can see and keep in mind that they all work in tandem, but is ultimately the state that controls what happens. So on the local level, which is also part of the trickle-down effect, we have county commissioners, mayor, city council, and town board. Many cities and towns have council meetings, hearings, and legislative sessions that are open to the public, which is part of civic engagement, to go testify or, get involved with talking to your representatives. You are directly represented in local government by a mayor and city or town council that serves as a local legislative body by proposing bills and passing laws. Elections may also be held for judges, prosecutors, county clerks, and other offices. And it's important not to overlook these positions and their effect on communities when you are voting. These positions actually have the most direct effect on the communities. So, like, sheriffs would be involved with community safety, policing, and jails, where prosecutors determine who is jailed, and the judges would determine the cash bails that are doled out, which is also an issue that some activists are tackling. And they also, like the county clerks, determine businesses and things they can do, such as liquor licenses. So these county level positions are very important to research when it is time to cast your vote. Local governments share responsibilities with the state and derive all powers from the state government, as we talked about before. Unique structures and responsibilities in each state, and most operate in two-tiered structure with counties, cities, towns, or municipalities. So it's interconnected and interwoven. The powers of the local government: they enforce state laws within their local borders, collect taxes, maintain county jails, lead community development initiatives, such as preventing homelessness, decreasing unemployment, or making neighborhoods safer. They direct the activities of public works, such as maintaining streets and sewers, oversee police and fire departments, oversee municipal courts, and the funding thereof. So as a reminder of modes of civic engagement, it involves so many aspects of the things that we've discussed. So next we'll talk specifically about voter registration. How to use your voice with your vote. The voting booth is the one place where every person holds the same weight, regardless of income, gender, or the color of one's skin. And as you can see here, women have outvoted men since 1980. So The dark line here, starting in 1980, is women, where the lighter line indicates the voting percentages of men. Only 61.4% of eligible voters turned out in the 2016 election. Of that 61.4%, 63.3% of eligible women voted in 2016. Women have cast more than 10 million votes than men in recent elections. In 2018, 66.9% of all eligible voters were registered, and 68.5% of eligible women voters were registered. So it's important to keep that momentum up and cast your votes. As the 2020 election season ramps up, make sure that you are registered and that your registration is up to date. Check that the address and name you registered with are still correct. And a simple way to check this information is to visit All In Together's Action Center to find state-specific voter guides that include information on voter registration deadlines, election rules for your state, address confidentiality programs, and changes to election dates. And when you log on, this is what you will see under the voter guide. You'll get COVID-19 updates for your state, election rules, here's the register to vote, and you'll get all the important information that you need to know. And now, if you have your cell phone handy, you can get it out and we'll use this QR code here and I'll show you what it looks like. So get the camera activated on your phone, then you hold it up to capture the QR code, and when you have it on your screen, a thing will pop up that says web page. Tap here to go weall.vote and then tap. Tap where it tells you to tap. You have it? Okay, that will bring you to the When We All Vote All In Together page. And you can see it says register yourself to vote. From your local school board to the Senate, it's important to vote in every election. Thanks for taking the first step. Take just a few minutes and complete the form below to get started and to make sure your voice is heard. You can select the language. It asks for your email address and zip code. And you click next step and it'll walk you through the process. Just wait here and allow everybody a chance. And as you do that, I'll just say that it's important to note with all the talk on online voting and COVID and post office and all of that, there's no online voter registration in the states of Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, New Hampshire, or Maine. North Dakota is the only state where registration is not required, where they mail out ballots to citizens. And Oklahoma passed an online voter registration law, but it has not been implemented. And with that, we'll move on. With the All In Together Action Center, this is how it looks, and you can get if you look down here, we went through the voting part. You can also contact your federal representatives, your state representatives, or access the voter guide, which You'll be able to see election rules and everything that you need to know about voting. It is very, very important to ensure that other voices count. To do that, we can register 20 people in 2020 by taking the All In Together pledge. Here's the link, aitogether.org/register 20 in 20. There you can receive more voter registration tools and information. So let's get started. If you have a pen and paper handy or input it in your phone, write the names of 5 people who come to mind, who you will reach out to and check that they are registered with up-to-date information. Think of someone who recently moved to a new address, or someone who recently changed their name, recently turned 18 years old, or recently started college and may need to request an absentee ballot. I'll give you a minute to do that. Also know that your state's Secretary of State's office website has information on getting paper forms and fun swag like the I voted stickers for in-person events, which of course should be done safely, like voter registration table set up somewhere. So now consider how you can integrate voter registration into your existing programming and spaces. Through an organization website, email communications, dropping off voter registration materials at the front desk or lobby spaces of places that you know, break rooms and office common areas. I've seen someone who set up voter registration stations in emergency rooms at hospitals, because oftentimes the people who go there are not already registered to vote. I know someone who is calling transitional housing locations to drop off applications for voter registration for the residents at those facilities. So get creative, think about people that you can reach or people who probably have run into barriers with voter registration, and reach out and fill those voids. You can plan a formal or informal voter registration event. You need to know your state's laws and voting rules, which you can find in the All In Together Action Center. Which official forms to use, whether your state offers online registration. If your state offers it, use it. Who is eligible to register, and absentee mail-in voting rules. This information can also be found on the Secretary of State's website for your state. Do not collect paper forms unless they are sealed and you are sure to mail them. Check if your state has address confidentiality programs and how to enroll. There are 36 states that have address confidentiality programs at the current time. There are some lawmakers who are working to make it a nationwide program, and that program too is offered through the Secretary of State's office. You can encourage people to verify that their registration was processed by checking back, and ask for permission to follow up with reminders to vote and collect contact information. So what's next? We've gotten all this information on census participation, why it's important, voter registration, making sure you yourself are properly registered so you can vote. I mean, there's all these things that we can do. So what's next? Let's talk about creating an action plan. Here again, as a reminder, is all the ways that you can get involved with civic engagement. Beyond voting and running for office, we'll reiterate it's contacting elected officials, speaking at a town hall, testifying before a legislative body, writing an op-ed, volunteering for an advocacy organization or campaign, donating to an issue or political campaign that interests you, census participation, and registering people to vote. So now if you're wondering, well, how do I get started? Who can I reach out to? Here are some ideas. You can join a coalition and plug into existing work. You can check out our list of community partners and reach out and introduce yourself to them. You can join our Emerging Leaders program here at All In Together, where you join a local cohort within a national network of women interested in growing their civic leadership. It is free and accessible to all. You receive civic engagement curricula and peer support as you take action around the issues that matter most to you. And please know it's a flexible commitment designed to fit your evolving needs. So you can put into it the time that you have. There's no set, like, you know, one meeting a week or anything like that. It's designed to fit your needs. And you can see here is just a snapshot of the All In Together community partners. There are over 120 of them throughout the nation. So I'll give you a second to take a look. And more are being added to continuously, really. All In Together continues to reach out to various organizations to partner with. So what's next for me and my fellowship in civic engagement is I will be offering some opportunities here through All In Together. September will be about registering people to vote through a workshop and events. In October, I will be hosting a writing and op-ed workshop. And in November, I will host a panel about contacting elected officials and testifying before a legislative body. Myself and the House of Representative member I worked with will talk about our path from our first conversation to getting a bill signed into law this last August by the governor. So, I mean, it gives you a good idea on what it takes, which is an interesting conversation that we will have. I hope that you will join us. And also one thing to note is Tuesday, September 22nd is National Voter Registration Day. So there will be many event offers on that day for your participation. All In Together will also be sharing additional civic engagement opportunities, including roles you can play and get out the vote. To learn more, stay in contact with me, All In Together, or both. I hope this workshop was worth your time, which I am grateful you spent with me here. Please reach out with any comments or questions you may have. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attendance.